She came home Tuesday night and dropped her gym bag like it weighed nothing, which was strange because Stephanie usually complained about lugging that thing around. No hello, no kiss on the cheek, just straight to the fridge for her usual sparkling water. I was at the kitchen island going through property contracts when she walked past me like I was furniture. "How was training?" I asked, not looking up from the Henderson strip mall lease. "Fine," she said, scrolling through her phone with the fridge door still open. I waited for her to ask about my day, about the 3 deals I'd closed, about anything. Nothing. When I tried to catch her eye, she was already heading upstairs with that gym bag that apparently weighed nothing now. "Stephanie," I called after her, "everything okay?" She paused on the 3rd step and looked back at me like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. "You're reading into things again, Ryan. Don't start." That phrase hit different than it used to. Reading into things, like wanting my wife to acknowledge I exist, was somehow unreasonable. The next morning, I found a credit card statement in our shared mail that I'd never seen before. Stephanie Pierce, it said, but the account number was foreign to me. The charges made my coffee go cold. Bella Vista Restaurant, 127ers. Nordstrom Personal Styling, $220. SoulCycle Premium Membership Upgrade, $65 monthly. I sat there staring at numbers that told a story I wasn't part of. When Stephanie came downstairs in her new workout gear, another thing I apparently hadn't been consulted on, I held up the statement. "What's this?" She glanced at it while fixing her protein shake. "I got my own card. You're always analyzing every purchase." "Analyzing?" I set the paper down carefully. "I look at our joint account because I pay the mortgage and utilities." "Well, now you don't have to worry about my expenses." She grabbed her keys. "I'm handling my own things." "Since when?" "Since I decided I needed some independence." She headed for the door. "Jordan says financial autonomy is important for personal growth." Jordan, that was new. "Who's Jordan?" "My trainer. He's helping me with more than just fitness." She smiled at her phone. "He's got insights about relationships, about knowing your worth." The door closed behind her before I could ask what the hell that meant. That afternoon, a package arrived addressed to our house, but with a name I didn't recognize. Victoria's Secret, size medium. Stephanie wore size small, had for the entire 4 years we'd been married. When I texted her about it, she said it was a mix-up with a friend's order and to just leave it on the counter. Something twisted in my gut. Mix-ups don't happen with lingerie orders. I called Ashley. Stephanie's younger sister had always been straight with me, even when Stephanie wasn't. We met at the coffee shop near her marketing firm downtown. "She's different," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Distant, secretive. There's this trainer guy giving her relationship advice." Ashley stirred sugar into her latte, frowning. "Stephanie mentioned she was working with someone new at that fancy gym. Said he was transformative or something equally dramatic." "You think I'm being paranoid?" "Ryan, you're the least paranoid person I know. You analyze commercial real estate markets for a living. If you're sensing something's off, it probably is." She leaned forward. "What's your gut telling you?" My gut was telling me my wife was lying about where she spent her evenings and who she was spending them with. But I didn't say that, not yet. Instead, I went home and tried the husband playbook, made dinner reservations at her favorite Italian place, bought flowers for no reason, suggested we drive up to the hill country for the weekend, maybe check out some wineries. Stephanie's response to all of it was the same polite smile she'd give a persistent salesperson. "That's sweet, Ryan, but I've got sessions with Jordan all weekend. He's helping me work through some personal blocks." Personal blocks. Like I was the problem she needed professional help to navigate around. I stopped trying after that. Instead, I started paying attention. Stephanie's gym sessions went from 3 times a week to 5. Her personal trainer sessions always seemed to run long, sometimes until 9 or 10 p.m. She'd come home glowing and energized, talking about breakthroughs and mindset shifts, about how Jordan was helping her realize her potential. "He says I've been settling," she told me one night, toweling off her hair. "Playing small, not demanding what I deserve." "What do you deserve that you're not getting?" I asked. She looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Someone who challenges me, someone who pushes me to be better." The implication hung in the air between us like smoke. "Someone who makes me feel alive," she continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Jordan understands ambition. He gets that growth requires risk. I watched her face as she talked about this man, watched the way her eyes lit up when she said his name. This wasn't just fitness advice. This was something else entirely. That's when I called Martinez, a private investigator Kevin Walsh had recommended when his business partner was skimming money. Martinez was a former cop who specialized in what he called clarity situations, when people needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. We met at his small office next to a trophy shop. The walls were covered with certificates and commendations that spoke to a career built on finding truth in messy situations. "Give me 2 weeks," Martinez said after I had laid out the timeline. "I'll get you facts, not suspicions. My rate is $20,500 for comprehensive surveillance and documentation." I wrote the check without hesitation. After 12 years in commercial real estate, I'd learned that information was always worth the investment. 2 weeks felt like 2 months, but I kept my routine. Work, gym, home. I didn't hover or interrogate. I just watched and waited, cataloging the small changes that painted a picture I didn't want to see. The way Stephanie's phone never left her hand. The way she showered immediately after coming home, washing away evidence of wherever she'd really been. The way she talked about Jordan with the kind of reverence usually reserved for mentors or saviors. When Martinez finally called, his voice was steady and professional. "We're done. Come by when you can." He handed me a folder that made everything make sense. Stephanie wasn't just working out with Jordan Blake. She was having dinner with him at Bella Vista Restaurant. She was shopping with him at Nordstrom. She was spending nights at his apartment on the east side, the same nights she told me she was having late sessions or girls' nights with college friends. The photos were clinical, time-stamped, undeniable. My wife laughing at something Jordan said over expensive wine. My wife leaving his apartment building at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. My wife kissing him goodbye in the parking lot of that fancy gym I'd been paying for. "Comprehensive documentation," Martinez said, pointing to the timestamps. "Every location matches her story to you, with a 12-hour discrepancy. Tuesday night, when she said she was at her mom's house helping with yard work, she was at his place until 2 a.m. I sat in my truck outside Martinez's office and stared at the evidence of my marriage ending. The weird thing was, I felt more relief than rage. At least now I knew I wasn't crazy. That night, I laid the folder on the kitchen island where I'd found that credit card statement and waited. Stephanie came in around 9:30, hair damp, cheeks flushed from what she'd probably call an intense session. She saw me at the counter and started to smile. "Good workout?" I asked. "Amazing. Jordan really pushed me tonight. I feel like a new person." She grabbed a bottle of water, still glowing with whatever endorphins Jordan had helped her discover. I opened the folder and turned it so she could see the first photo. Her and Jordan sharing dessert at a restaurant that definitely wasn't a gym. Her smile didn't fade immediately. It sort of melted, like ice cream in the sun. "You hired someone." Not a question, a statement of fact delivered in the same tone she'd used to comment on the weather. "I did." She moved closer, saw the timestamp on the photo. "That's invasive. That's clarity." Stephanie closed the folder with 2 fingers and looked at me like I'd disappointed her. "I wish you hadn't found out this early. It would have been easier if you'd figured it out naturally." I stared at her. "Easier for who?" "For you," she said, like she believed. "Det mottakt. This way you get to keep some dignity." The audacity of that statement, that she was somehow protecting my dignity by sneaking around behind my back, almost made me laugh. "Stephanie," I started, but she cut me off. "Don't make this dramatic, Ryan. These things happen. Jordan and I, we have something special. Something you and I never had." "What exactly do we not have?" She shrugged, settling into the role of relationship expert with disturbing ease. "Chemistry, passion. He challenges me intellectually. He makes me feel alive in ways you never could." She paused, seemed to consider her words carefully, then delivered them like a verdict she'd been rehearsing. "Face it, he's just way better than you." The silence that followed felt like falling down a well. Not just the cheating, but the satisfaction she took in telling me about my replacement. The casual cruelty of ranking her husband against her affair partner and announcing the results in our kitchen. I stood up slowly, pushed my chair back, and kept my voice level because I knew the volume wasn't where strength lived. "Pack your essentials tonight. Everything else, you can coordinate with Ashley to pick up while I'm not here." Stephanie laughed. Actually laughed. You can't be serious. Dead serious. You've got someone better? Go be with him. Ryan, come on. We can work through this. Work through what? You just told me another man is better than me in my own kitchen. What exactly are we working toward? Her confidence flickered. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. That's why you said it. She tried a different approach, stepping closer, softening her voice like she was talking to a spooked animal. Look, maybe Jordan and I got carried away. Maybe we can go to counseling, figure this out. I picked up the folder and handed it to her. You figured it out already. You chose him. Now, live with that choice. You're really going to throw away 4 years of marriage over a mistake? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did. I moved toward the hallway. And it wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidents. This was a series of deliberate decisions that led to you telling me your replacement is an upgrade. Stephanie packed a suitcase that night, muttering about overreactions and stubbornness. At the door, she turned back one last time, trying to reclaim some control over the narrative. You'll regret this when you realize what you're losing. I already know what I lost, I said. A wife who lies to my face and tells me her affair partner is an upgrade. That's not a loss I'm mourning. She left. The house got quieter, but it also got cleaner. I changed the locks the next morning and called an attorney Ashley had recommended. By the end of the week, divorce papers were filed. In Texas, even with cooperation from both parties, the process takes a minimum of 60 days. I marked the calendar and got back to work. Ashley called that weekend. Stephanie told me what happened. I'm sorry, Ryan. Don't be. I'm not. She says you wouldn't even discuss counseling. There's nothing to discuss. She made her choice clear. I was reorganizing my closet, reclaiming space that had been occupied by someone who preferred someone else's company. She evaluated our marriage against her alternative and announced the results. I'm just accepting her assessment. Ashley was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I think you handled it right. She needed to face consequences. She's facing reality. There's a difference. Over the following weeks, I settled into a routine that felt like mine for the first time in months. I took on a major strip mall renovation project that would keep my crew busy through the holidays. I bought a new truck, a Ford F-150, with all the features I'd been wanting but hadn't purchased, because Stephanie thought trucks were suburban cliches. I moved some savings into a down payment on a small rental duplex near the university. The property needed work, but the location was solid and the rent potential strong. Real estate had always been my strength, and it felt good to make decisions based on data rather than someone else's moods. Ashley and I had gotten closer through the whole mess. Turned out she'd always thought Stephanie was spoiled, always expected people to adjust around her whims and dramatic pronouncements. Ashley was different, direct, funny, practical. She'd helped me pick out furniture to replace the pieces Stephanie had taken, taught me how to cook something besides sandwiches and takeout. We'd developed an easy friendship based on honesty instead of walking on eggshells around someone who might decide you weren't meeting her ever-changing standards. 3 months later, on a Wednesday night in October, Ashley was at my place helping me review insurance quotes for the new property when someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Stephanie standing on my porch. No makeup, eyes red from crying, clutching tissues like lifelines. She wore an oversized sweater that hung on her like she'd lost weight, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail that spoke to either desperation or complete surrender to circumstances beyond her control. "Who is it?" Ashley asked from the couch, looking up from her laptop where she'd been comparing deductible options. "Your sister." Ashley's eyebrows went up. "This should be interesting." I opened the door halfway. Stephanie looked terrible. Not gym glow terrible, but genuinely wrecked. The kind of terrible that comes from having your carefully constructed fantasy collapse under the weight of reality. "Ryan," she said, voice shaking, "please, I need to talk to you." "About what?" I made a mistake. A huge mistake. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing them but couldn't quite get them right. I thought I wanted something different, but Jordan, he wasn't who I thought he was. Be specific. He dumped me. The admission came out like a confession torn from someone who'd run out of other options. Last week, said I was too needy, too dramatic, that he never wanted anything serious with a married woman anyway. Behind me, I heard Ashley make a sound that might have been a snort. Ashley had always been good at reading people's motives, probably because her job in marketing required her to understand what drove consumer behavior. She'd called this outcome months ago, though she'd been too polite to say so at the time. "So you came here," I said. "I miss our life. I miss you making coffee in the mornings with that ridiculous precision, measuring everything twice like you're building a foundation. I miss your terrible jokes when you're working on projects around the house. I miss feeling safe." She wiped her nose with a tissue that had seen better days. "I was stupid, Ryan. I let him convince me that what we had wasn't enough, but it was everything." I leaned against the doorframe, studying this woman who'd shared my bed for 4 years, who'd walked out on our marriage for a gym trainer who treated her like entertainment between real relationships. "So, he dumped you that fast?" Stephanie flinched like I'd slapped her. "It wasn't, yes, okay? Yes, he dumped me fast. Turns out he was seeing other clients the whole time. I was just convenient." From the living room, Ashley started laughing. Not mean laughter, honest laughter. The kind that escapes when something ridiculous finally resolves itself exactly the way anyone with common sense could have predicted. Stephanie's face went red. "Ashley, you're here?" Ashley appeared in the doorway next to me, closing her laptop and setting it aside. "I am helping Ryan compare insurance premiums for his new rental property." "So, that's how it is now?" Stephanie's voice turned sharp, desperate for something to attack, since her victim narrative wasn't landing the way she'd hoped. 3 months, and you've already moved in on my sister?" Ashley laughed harder. "Moved in? Stephanie, I'm helping him adult. Something you never bothered to do." She crossed her arms. "You know, like helping him figure out whether a $2,000 deductible makes more sense than paying higher monthly premiums. Real exciting stuff." Stephanie ignored her, focused on me with the intensity of someone making a final sales pitch. "Please, Ryan, can we at least try, go to counseling, figure out how to rebuild what we had?" I looked at this woman who told me her affair partner was way better than me in my own kitchen, who was now standing on my porch asking me to fix what she'd broken, because her upgrade had turned out to be temporary entertainment. "No," I said simply. "Just like that? No discussion?" "What's to discuss? You told me Jordan was way better than me. You made your choice based on that evaluation." I straightened up, no longer leaning on the doorframe. "I'm just accepting your professional assessment. I was wrong. You were honest. That's the first honest thing you said to me in months." I started to close the door. "I hope it works out for you, Stephanie, but it's not working out with me." "You can't be this cold," she said, desperation creeping into her voice, like water finding cracks in a foundation. "We were good together once. We had plans. We talked about kids, about buying a bigger house. We were convenient together. There's a difference." I paused, letting that distinction settle between us. "And those plans were mine. You were just along for the ride until something more exciting came along." Ashley stepped forward, putting a supportive hand on my shoulder. Not romantic, just solidarity. The kind of gesture family members make when they want someone to know they're not standing alone. "Stephanie, you made your bed with the fitness instructor. Stop asking Ryan to fluff your pillows." Stephanie stared at Ashley's hand on my shoulder, and something ugly crossed her face. Something desperate and vindictive that I'd never seen before, but probably should have recognized earlier. "You two are disgusting. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? Ashley always wanted what I had." "The only plan," Ashley said calmly, "was helping my friend move on from someone who treated him like a backup option." She squeezed my shoulder once and let go. "You want to know what I always wanted? I wanted my sister to appreciate what she had before she threw it away for someone who saw her as a side project." Stephanie's mouth opened for another attack, another desperate attempt to make her poor choices someone else's fault, but I didn't give her the space. "Take care of yourself, Stephanie," I said, and closed the door. Not a slam, just a clean final close. Through the wood, we could hear her voice getting louder, making accusations, demanding attention like a child whose tantrum wasn't producing the desired results. Ashley and I walked back to the kitchen and poured coffee, letting the noise fade into background static. "Think she'll keep going?" Ashley asked, settling back into her chair with the insurance paperwork. "For a while, then she'll find another Jordan." I sat down across from her, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Some other guy who'll tell her what she wants to hear until he gets bored. Poor bastard." We sat back down with the insurance quotes, discussing coverage limits and liability protections, while the noise from the porch gradually faded. After 10 minutes, we heard the sound of a car door, then nothing. That was the last time I saw Stephanie at my door. Life didn't pause for the aftermath. I bought that rental property I'd been eyeing and hired 2 more guys for my crew when the workload picked up. Ashley got promoted to creative director at her firm and started dating a lawyer named Michael, who actually laughed at her jokes and didn't treat conversation like a performance review. The house stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like home. I kept the dining room table because I liked having a place to spread out contracts and host actual conversations instead of one-sided progress reports about someone else's personal journey. I cooked meals that weren't apologies and invited friends who didn't keep scorecards or evaluate my performance against mystery competitors. Some nights I sit on my back deck with a beer and think about that folder Martinez handed me, about Stephanie's face when she delivered her verdict about Jordan being way better, about how that sentence was actually a gift wrapped in an insult. It saved me years of wondering what was wrong with me, years of trying to fix something that was already broken from someone else's perspective. The clarity was brutal, but it was also liberating. A month after Stephanie's failed comeback attempt, I ran into Kevin Walsh at the hardware store. He was picking up supplies for a deck renovation at his lake house, and I was grabbing materials for a bathroom remodel at the duplex. "You look different," he said, loading 2x4s into his cart. "Lighter." "Feel different," I admitted. "Turns out getting honest feedback about your marriage is better than guessing what's wrong for months." Martinez came through, worth every penny of that $2,500. I grabbed the tile spacers I needed. Sometimes paying for clarity is cheaper than living with confusion. Kevin nodded. Linda and I went through a rough patch about 5 years ago. Different situation, but same principle. You can't fix what you can't see clearly. We talked for a few more minutes about property values and contractor reliability, the kind of conversation men have when they are both working on projects that matter to them. It felt good to discuss plans that were entirely mine, decisions I could make without checking whether they aligned with someone else's vision of what my life should look like. The duplex renovation was coming along nicely. I'd gut rehabbed the kitchens and bathrooms, refinished the hardwood floors, and added modern fixtures that would attract quality tenants. The numbers worked perfectly. Rental income would cover the mortgage plus maintenance reserves, with enough left over for a decent return on investment. More importantly, the work gave me something concrete to focus on. Every morning I had tasks with clear objectives and measurable outcomes. Install flooring? Check. Repair drywall? Check. Test electrical systems? Check. Success was defined by functional results rather than someone else's emotional satisfaction levels. Ashley had been invaluable throughout the renovation, helping me source materials and providing a second opinion on design choices. Her marketing background made her surprisingly good at understanding what features tenants would value most. We'd developed an efficient working partnership based on complementary skills and mutual respect. "You should consider flipping houses," she suggested one Saturday afternoon as we installed new cabinet hardware in the duplex's smaller unit. "You're good at seeing potential in overlooked properties." "Maybe someday. Right now I'm focused on building rental income streams." I adjusted the drawer pull to make sure it was perfectly level. Flipping is about quick profits. This is about long-term cash flow. "Very practical, very Ryan," she smiled. "Stephanie never understood that, did she? The difference between quick excitement and sustainable value." Ashley was right. Stephanie had always been drawn to immediate gratification, the rush of new purchases, the thrill of dramatic changes, the excitement of secret relationships. She'd never appreciated the quiet satisfaction of building something solid over time. 3 weeks later, I found out through mutual friends that Stephanie had moved back in with her parents. Apparently, her experiment in independent living hadn't gone as smoothly as she'd expected. Rent was expensive when you weren't sharing costs with someone who paid the mortgage. Grocery shopping was tedious when you couldn't rely on someone else to handle the meal planning. Car maintenance was annoying when you actually had to remember to schedule oil changes yourself. The same friends mentioned that Jordan had moved on to another client, a recently divorced real estate agent who was ready to transform her life through fitness and personal growth. The pattern was apparently part of his business model: identify women going through transitions, offer them attention and validation, then move on when the situation became complicated. I felt no satisfaction in Stephanie's struggles, just a quiet recognition that consequences tend to follow choices, especially when those choices are made without considering long-term implications. By December, the duplex was fully leased to two responsible tenants, a graduate student in one unit and a young professional couple in the other. The rent checks arrived promptly each month, deposited automatically into an account designated for property investments. I was already looking at a second property, a small commercial building that could be converted into office space for local businesses. Ashley and I had settled into a comfortable routine of Sunday dinners and occasional property scouting trips. She had an eye for potential and wasn't afraid to crawl around basements or climb into attics to assess structural issues. More importantly, she understood that real estate investment was about numbers and location, not emotions and wishful thinking. On a cold Thursday evening in January, we were reviewing financial projections for the commercial property when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ryan, this is Stephanie. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize properly. I handled everything badly and I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I hope you're doing well." I showed the text to Ashley, who read it twice before handing the phone back. "Response?" she asked. "None. She's apologizing to make herself feel better, not because she expects anything from me." I deleted the message without replying. Real apologies don't come with expectations attached. Smart. She's probably in therapy and working through a step program about making amends. Ashley returned her attention to the spreadsheet we'd been reviewing. The timing's convenient, right when she's dealing with the reality of adult life without a safety net. We spent the rest of the evening calculating potential returns on the commercial investment, comparing different financing options, and discussing timeline for renovations. Productive conversation focused on concrete goals rather than emotional archaeology. That night, as I locked up the house and turned off the lights, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't thinking about Stephanie or Jordan or what had gone wrong. I was thinking about tomorrow's meeting with the commercial property owner, about the contractor estimates for the office conversion, about the satisfaction of building something valuable from overlooked potential. The respect lived in the follow-through, but it also lived in the moving forward. 2 months later, Ashley and I were having coffee after successfully closing on the commercial property when she brought up something that had been on her mind. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Stephanie had never met Jordan? If she'd just stayed bored but faithful?" I considered the question while watching steam rise from my coffee cup. Honestly, I think she would have found another Jordan eventually. Maybe not a trainer, but someone who represented excitement or validation or whatever she felt was missing. So you don't think it was really about him? It was about her needing someone to tell her she was special. Jordan just happened to be available and willing to say what she wanted to hear. I took a sip of coffee. The problem wasn't Jordan. The problem was that she needed constant external validation to feel good about herself. Ashley nodded. "That's what I figured, but I wanted to hear you say it." "Why?" "Because it means you understand that her choices weren't really about you. They were about her. And understanding that difference is how you know you're actually over it." She was right. The sting had faded not because time had passed, but because I'd finally understood that Stephanie's dissatisfaction had been her own burden to carry, not my failure to fix. 6 months after that conversation with Ashley, I was reviewing quarterly reports for both rental properties when I got a call from Martinez. He was checking in on former clients, making sure his work had produced the intended results. "How are things working out?" he asked. "Better than I expected. Turns out clarity really is worth the investment." "Good to hear. You handle the information well. Not everyone does." There was a pause. "Some people use what I give them as ammunition for drama. Others use it to make clean decisions. You made clean decisions." After we hung up, I thought about that distinction, drama versus decisions. Stephanie had been drawn to drama, the thrill of secret relationships, the excitement of emotional chaos, the satisfaction of creating situations that required other people to react to her choices. I'd been focused on decisions, practical steps that led to predictable outcomes. The commercial property conversion was ahead of schedule and under budget. I'd leased 2 of the 3 office suites to a law firm and an accounting practice, with several inquiries pending for the 3rd space. The monthly cash flow would cover all expenses and provide enough profit to start looking at additional investments. Ashley had been promoted again, this time to regional marketing director, which meant more travel but also significantly higher compensation. Michael had proposed over the holidays, and they were planning a small wedding in the spring. She'd asked me to walk her down the aisle since their father had passed away 3 years earlier. "Are you sure?" I'd asked when she brought it up. "That's usually family." "You are family. You've been more consistent support than my actual sister over the past year." She smiled. "Besides, Stephanie burned that bridge when she accused me of plotting to steal her husband. Hard to come back from that level of paranoia." I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Stephanie had eventually moved to Dallas, taken a job with a property management company, and was dating someone new, a personal trainer, interestingly enough. Apparently she'd found another Jordan, or maybe Jordans were her type regardless of names or specific circumstances. The pattern didn't surprise me. People tend to recreate familiar dynamics, especially when they haven't examined why those dynamics appeal to them in the first place. On a warm evening in March, I was grilling dinner on the back deck when Kevin Walsh stopped by to return a tool he'd borrowed. We stood in the yard talking about his lake house project while the steaks cooked. "You know what I've noticed?" he said, accepting a beer from the cooler. "You've got that settled look again, like you're comfortable in your own space. Took a while to get here. Always does. Linda says the best thing about surviving a bad relationship is learning what you actually want versus what you think you're supposed to want." He gestured toward the house, the well-maintained yard, the new truck in the driveway. "Looks like you figured out what works for you." Kevin was right. Everything around me reflected choices made for practical reasons, rather than to impress someone else or meet external expectations. The house was arranged for convenience and comfort. The investments were selected for steady returns rather than exciting potential. The social calendar was filled with people who added value rather than drama. Later that evening, as I sat on the deck reviewing property listings for potential acquisitions, I thought about the conversation Ashley and I had shared months earlier about validation. Stephanie had needed constant external confirmation that she was special, desirable, worthy of attention. When I stopped providing that validation, she'd sought it elsewhere. But the deeper issue hadn't been about Jordan or any specific alternative. It had been about the impossible task of filling someone else's emotional void through attention and reassurance. No amount of flowers, dinner reservations, or weekend trips could address Stephanie's fundamental dissatisfaction with herself. I'd spent months trying to solve a problem that wasn't mine to solve, trying to fix a person who saw the relationship as a support system for her self-esteem rather than a partnership between equals. The folder Martinez had given me hadn't just documented Stephanie's affair. It had documented the end of my confusion about what was wrong with our marriage. Nothing was wrong with me. Something was wrong with the dynamic we'd created, where my job was to make her feel good about herself, rather than build something together. 3 weeks later, Ashley and I were putting finishing touches on the wedding planning when she brought up a subject I'd been avoiding. "Have you thought about dating again?" "Not really. I'm focused on business right now." "That's what worries me. You're 34, Ryan. You've got your life together, you're financially stable, you've learned from your mistakes. Don't let one bad experience keep you from finding something good." "I'm not closed to it. I'm just not actively looking." "Fair enough. But when you are ready, remember that not every woman is Stephanie. Some of us actually appreciate stability over excitement." Ashley's wedding was small but perfect, exactly what she and Michael wanted, rather than what tradition or other people expected. I walked her down the aisle, feeling proud of the woman she'd become, and grateful for the friendship we'd built through difficult circumstances. At the reception, I found myself in conversations with several of Ashley's friends, intelligent women with careers and interests beyond finding someone to validate their choices. It was refreshing to talk with people who asked questions about my business and property investments, rather than expecting me to be fascinated by their personal growth. Journeys. One conversation in particular stayed with me. Sarah, a veterinarian who owned her own practice, mentioned that she'd been through a divorce 2 years earlier. "What did you learn?" I asked. "That I'd rather be alone than with someone who sees me as a supporting character in their story." She smiled. "Took me 6 months to figure out that being single wasn't a problem to solve. It was just a phase before finding the right partnership." Driving home that night, I realized something had shifted. For the first time since the marriage ended, I could imagine sharing my life with someone again. Not to fill a void or provide validation, but to build something larger than what either person could create alone. A month later, I asked Sarah if she'd like to have dinner, not because I was lonely or needed companionship, but because I enjoyed her company and wanted to see where honest conversation might lead. She said yes. 6 months later, as I sit on my deck reviewing the quarterly reports for 3 rental properties, I think about the folder Martinez handed me almost 2 years ago, about Stephanie's face when she announced that Jordan was way better than me, about how that sentence, as brutal as it felt at the time, had been exactly the clarity I needed. If someone asks me now what I learned from that whole mess, I tell them this: when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. When they tell you someone else outranks you, don't negotiate for your position back. Just change the game. I'd pay Martinez earlier if I had to do it again. But other than that, I wouldn't change a thing. The respect lives in the follow-through, but more than that, it lives in the understanding that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's evaluation. It lives in building a life that works for you, regardless of who's watching or keeping score. Some nights Sarah joins me on the deck, and we review property listings together, discussing market trends and investment potential. She brings a different perspective, and her questions often help me see opportunities I might have missed. It's the kind of partnership I didn't know I wanted until I found it. The kind where 2 complete people choose to build something together rather than using each other to fill gaps in their individual lives. That's the difference between settling and choosing, between needing someone and wanting someone, between building on weakness and building on strength. The respect lives in knowing the difference.